All right, we are back on Get Up, and Ann Arbor is our next stop because that's where the most important story in sports is currently brewing. The Big Ten has formally notified Michigan it could be facing disciplinary action amid this sign-stealing scandal. Michigan has until tomorrow to respond. That means this is coming to a head right now. Jim Harbaugh spoke yesterday about all of the noise being directed at him.
Nobody's, wants criticism or, and that's why I work so hard to do everything right, both on and off the field, because it's been that way for a long time, since I was 22 years old. But if the criticism is directed at me and not on my adolescent kids at home or the players on the football team, then I'm okay with it.
All right, so that's what Jim said yesterday as well. The Michigan Athletic Director, Ward Manuel, who was on the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, said, quote, I want to provide an update regarding my participation. I will not be traveling to our weekly meeting in Dallas, but instead will stay in Ann Arbor attending to important matters regarding the ongoing investigation into our football program. He looks forward to being back with the rest of them next week. So let's get into all of this. I want everyone is going to be in on this conversation, but let's start with Heather and Paul, who are always here when we need them. I point out every single week, no one knows the inner workings of all this stuff better than Heather Dinich does. So we are all listening, Heather. What do all the fans need to know as we approach this incredibly important moment in this investigation?
That Jim Harbaugh could be suspended as soon as this week, with Ward Manuel staying back on campus to handle this instead of going to the CFP selection committee for his role there. This indicates that it's on the fast track. Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, has the authority to impose as many as a 2-game suspension and up to $10,000 in a fine. That's on the Big Ten sportsmanship policy. If it were to go beyond that, then they would have to get permission. The Big Ten would have to get permission from a special board. But if it's 1 game, if it's 2 games, when is it? Which games are the suspension for? Because as you guys know, they play Penn State this week. That's huge. Then they're at Maryland, a game they should win with or without Jim Harbaugh. And then finally, the regular season finale against Ohio State. So what are they talking about here? And if the Big Ten goes down this path, I would expect Michigan to push back on it, because from Michigan's side, they are going to want to fight for a due, fair process. This is unique in that a conference would levy some kind of penalty before the investigation plays out. And that's what they are asking for. Hold on a minute. This is what the letter from Michigan to the Big Ten was last week. Hold on a minute. Before you do this, let due process play out and let the NCAA finish its investigation first.
All right, so that's an excellent explanation of where we sit. And again, the expectation is we could hear something as soon as the next day or two. So now we all sit back. Paul, you get the first crack at this. What is your reaction to all of it?
Well, I think it shows the severity of the situation, Greeny, that the commissioner, and he's a brand new commissioner too, Tony Petitti of the Big Ten, would intercede this quickly. A lot of commissioners would sit back and say, listen, let it play out, knowing very well that nothing's going to happen. Michigan moves on, possibly to the national championship. But give Tony Petitti a lot of credit for stepping in. And why is he stepping in? Because everyone in the league other than Michigan apparently wants him to step in because the situation is that grave. I think it looks very bad for Jim Harbaugh, but what does bad mean? Does that mean he misses a game or two? As long as Michigan is still eligible for the playoffs, then you have to wonder, what is this really all about? Because the school was gaining, if all these allegations are true, an unfair advantage. So it's still a mess, Greeny. I think Harbaugh very likely is going to be suspended. I don't know for how long. It's sending a message, but what kind of message is it really?
Is it still your expectation, Paul, as you have said on this show, and again, this is an ever-evolving story, so I more than give you the permission to change your mind as it continues. Is it still your opinion that this will be, one way or another, his last year at Michigan?
That is my opinion, based on so many mitigating factors. The one thing Jim Harbaugh has in his favor is that the fairly new president at the university is a big Harbaugh fan, even maybe a sicko fan. The athletic director is not, though. Ward Manuel, who you saw a minute ago, he and Harbaugh have had a very tense relationship. But I think Jim Harbaugh has to be smart enough, and he's a really bright guy, to see the handwriting on the wall that all these things are closing in on him. But the real issue, though, is can he find a job in the NFL, especially with all this controversy raised over his head?
All right, outstanding. Heather, very quickly before I bring it to is there anything we're missing here? Anything we should know as I open it up to, my table is jumping out of their chairs to react to this. Anything else that we need to clean up?
Well, I just think it's important for college football fans to know from a CFP perspective that the commissioners, I've spoken to sources at that level, have not directed the CFP to handle this any sort of way in terms of the rankings. And the repeated line from the CFP is that as long as Michigan is eligible to play in a bowl game, it is eligible to be ranked by the selection committee. And so far, all of these allegations are just that, as far as the committee meeting room, and are not expected to impact how the committee views Michigan. Unless, if Jim Harbaugh is suspended, they certainly consider that, just like an injured player or anything else. But that doesn't mean it's a hall pass to lose a game. It's another factor in the consideration.
What's your reaction?
My first reaction is, what are the facts, right? If it's a fact that they cheated and they broke the rules, then something needs to happen. But you do have to allow due process to run its course. So I don't understand trying to suspend Jim Harbaugh right now if we don't know that the entire investigation has been completed. I think if you say, hey, well, there's a lot of pressure from the outside. All right, well, if everybody wants you to jump off a bridge, you're going to jump off a bridge? No, you're not. You're going to take your qualitative analysis of the situation and decide for yourself what you want to do. So in this regard, the other thing that comes to mind for me is just the sign stealing and, like, is it an unfair advantage for Michigan? I don't know about you guys, but we all played. Every team we played against knew our signals, knew our calls. They actually go out and they try to do that, so you have to change them every single week. So I don't think it actually gave Michigan an unfair advantage on the football field, and I think this is a lot of...
Well, I mean, in the NFL, you change your calls every week. In college, it's a limited amount of practice time, so you don't really. At least that wasn't my experience. So it could have given them an advantage. However, I think what this makes clear to me is that there is no independent governing body, which makes this messy and ugly.
Yep.
And like Heather pointed out, that if there is a punishment, it's going to be because the other teams are pressuring them to do it.
Exactly.
And then if they pull it back, it's going to be because Michigan is fighting it back. Like, the whole point of having an independent governing body that follows these processes is that you can trust it. So I think that it's foolish as much as Paul wanted to, like, big up the commissioner. I think it's foolish to be like, hey, let's rush into this because they don't know everything. So if they give him a 2-game suspension, then 3 weeks from now we find out that it was much worse than what's going on, then you can't go back and
well, the NCAA theoretically is the independent body you're talking about. No one takes them very seriously. That's my point. And the Big Ten is hopelessly biased
for reasons like this.
Quick, Jeff, go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's silly. Like you said, you go through the due process. If Harbaugh is guilty and found guilty, then you punish him to whatever level you need to. What you're going to do now is punish kids who are making a run at the national championship by saying we're going to sit his coach in an inopportune time, whether it's Penn State. All right, we'll sit him for the Terps. We'll take that one. But other than that, you can't sit him for any of those games. It would be absolutely ridiculous because you're punishing the kids, not just Harbaugh.
My mind goes to the NFL coaching hiring cycle, and Paul referenced it. You know, this is a guy, and Harbaugh, everyone's always assumed would end up back in the NFL because he had so much success there. And this is the kind of thing that could lead to that. But I'm curious. I'm curious if there are teams that already weren't necessarily thrilled about the idea of bringing him in, that this would factor into those kinds of decisions as well. I'm not sure we should assume he just jumps cleanly to the NFL out of it.
To be clear, they have 3 games remaining. So you have their schedule in your head. They play Penn State, then they play Maryland, then they have, of course, the season finale against Ohio State before they could potentially get to a Big Ten championship. That's not definite. No, well, let's stay on this. They'll beat Maryland anyway, but that's neither here nor there. Here's the bottom line of this thing, okay? Tony Petitti is a very well-respected person, and he's brand new in this role at the Big Ten. But it's impossible not to point out that a conference is hopelessly conflicted in interest in all of this.
Absolutely.
Getting a team like Michigan into the national championship game would mean so much money for every school in the conference, and yet he is getting pressure from the other member schools to act in some way here, which is why, as you pointed out, the NCAA, which we've all had our issues with, but as a neutral body in all of this, that might really be the way to go to get an answer.
Well, you need to have a third-party independent group make this decision. Unfortunately, the NCAA does not feel like they have the power or respect that they used to have at one point for people to operate. And this might be the catalyst to get them that power and respect. The issue with the Big Ten levying the punishment is also it feels kind of hasty. Yep. And if we're talking about two games, if the stats that we've looked at that suggest that they are an entirely different team before and after this, if those are real and we find out how much impact these kind of rule-breaking decisions made have had, and then the result is 2 games, it feels like it was worth it. If I'm anybody else in college football, I'm like, all right, let's do our own cheating scandal, because all we're going to get is 2 games after we go to the playoffs in 2 seasons.
Right. That's all the Big Ten can levy, to be clear. The NCAA could come in. I mean, we've seen. They can do whatever they want. But that is probably a long way down the road.
They're way ahead, right? They put the cart before the horse here. You can't punish a football team until the investigation is completed. They've gone back and forth. So now you're getting out ahead of your skis here. I understand everybody's saying, hey, they're guilty, he's guilty, whatever. The truth is you're going to end up punishing players, whether you sit him right now or not, without going through the full investigation. And I get, we even made jokes last week, right? The guy pulled his hat down on the sideline, all of it. And they may all be complicit and may all be fully guilty. But you can't level punishment and put somebody as guilty until you do the investigation and go through the process. That's the part that's backwards to me. Until that happens, you're going to suspend him. Okay, don't suspend him or suspend him for the Terps. But otherwise, let them play these 2. Let these kids go play for a national.
Dominique, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Dominique. If they get only a 2-game suspension, which is assuming that everything that has been said is true,
be a home run.
Then it'd be a home run. So for me, I'm kind of like, all right, well, did they break the rules? If they broke the rules, yes, there deserves to be a punishment. But we can't have it be a trial by public demeanor or the public outrage where they're saying something needs to be done. Let's go do it. You have to have due process. If they cheated, they should get punished. Let's figure out how much they cheated, if they cheated in the first place. And then you don't want to have a suspension and then come back around and now it's a much longer suspension because we find out more and more information as the investigation goes on.
Sometimes I feel the need to remind people, because we all sit here and we talk, and sometimes you may forget that you guys all have all of these experiences. I mean, you won the Heisman Trophy, for crying out loud, so no one knows more about college football than you do. How much of an advantage do you think stealing signs actually is?
Yeah, I don't think it's much of an advantage at all. If you look at college football today, they've got 75 dudes on the sideline signaling things in, wearing different hats, having signs going on. Listen, Michael Jordan, everyone knew he was going to shoot the fadeaway. You still had to go out and stop it. Is it right? No. Did they break the rules if it's proven that they did steal those signs? Then no, it's not right. And that's a total different conversation. But is it an advantage? I personally don't think it is.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it's an enormous advantage. There were times when we tried to steal signs and were successful, and it made a difference. And there were times when we tried to steal signs and it did not work.
Give me an example. When you steal signs, and what does this mean now?
In the course of a game, you will watch the sidelines. Someone will. You may pick up what the signs are. Simply as run or pass, if I can check to a cover 4 when I know you're passing, or a cover 2, cover 3, or I know it's a pass, versus an all-out blitz when you're running, it matters a lot. And in the course of the game, if we can pick up what you are doing, yes, it changes the outcome of a game. But that is in the course of the game, which is completely legal. The idea that you could go and advance scout with cameras in your classes, that to me seems absurd and is definitely punishable and does impact the outside of the game. We saw the video where he's on the sideline run right, pass left. Tell me where the play is going. It's going to be real hard for you to have success if I know exactly where you're going.
Now, how many times as a defender did you know a sign beforehand, the offense changed that sign, and you told your D-line run right, and they ran left?
Oh, yeah.
There's times that happens. So for me, it's just the game within the game at that point. But if they broke the rules, they deserve to be punished. So let that be clear.
And to his point, every team operates in stealing of signs.
Yes.
Just somebody. Now, have they gone to these limits where they're going, scouting, advanced scouting, do all those? But at the end of the day, you still have to have due process to get through this thing to see what all has happened and how much punishment should be levied.
I want to get Graziano in here, and let's talk about the NFL side of this, right? Because he obviously had a very successful tenure in San Francisco. What is your expectation with him regarding the possibility that at some point he's back in the league?
I think it'll come up as it has the last couple of years. But the last couple of years, there were jobs that I think a lot of people thought he was going to get, including him in some cases, that he didn't. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that Jim Harbaugh ends up back in the NFL. I do think there will be teams that will explore it, and there may be a team or two that is willing to do it. But I don't think it's a completely clean process where it might have been 5-6 years ago, where everybody would just throw their doors open and say, yes, what do you want, what do you need in order to come here? I think there are more questions than there used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's teams in the NFL
I thought you were going to say something.
absolutely would love to have.
We'd love to have him.
Yeah, it only takes one. I'm just not sure it's going to be as automatic as we might think.
He's an offbeat personality. There's no question of that. I've known him 30 years. It doesn't work for everyone, but to your point, you just need one team to say this is the guy that we need. We'll see if that happens.